This class is going to help you navigate that beginning, like how to get to starting a design, how to get your style guide set up, and how to use it basically. So, how to set up your style guide, how to use it, and how to do some basic things right, like getting alignments right. Right. So, that's very important because I noticed that some of us, I checked our work and we had issues with alignment, especially alignment and this law of proximity. We had issues with it, hierarchy as well. We had issues with it. So hopefully we'll touch on those things by the end of this call. All right. So I had already gone ahead and I saw this style guide from the community on Figma. You just go to the Figma community and oh, there it is. Actually, you go to this Figma community and you just search style guide or whatever, and then you see if a couple of them. Just look for whichever one actually works best for you, and you can get it, duplicate it, basically check if it doesn't work for you, you delete it, and you look for another one. So some of the things that you have to do before starting a design, basically, don't just jump into it, right? You have to get a couple of things on the ground first, right? So I mean, I'm not talking about UX here. I'm not going to talk about UX because I know that the UX part is actually the first thing you get right. Okay. So the UX part, welcome Nelly. So the UX part is actually the first thing you get where you're doing your user research and whatever research that you have to do, and then your sketching screens and all of that. But this is the UI part where you begin to prototype. So basically, you are using creating a solution for what you have researched, and then you're designing it on the canvas. So this is what we're talking about. So you don't just start and maybe like get a frame and get a frame and just start designing and be like, okay, let me just put the hero and the nav bar and whatever. No, you have to go through these things. You have to settle with these guys first because they are going to help you stay consistent. If you don't have a style guide for your designs, you're not going to, it doesn't matter how good you are with your knowledge, your design is not really going, it's not going to look that nice. It's not going to look that pleasant to the eyes and it won't look consistent. So, that's why it's important to start with a style guide first. And when you're starting with a style guide, there are a couple of things that you have to think about. Okay. So one of the first things is the color. Like as you've seen here, it's okay. Let's just see this one. So one of the things to think about for me is the color first. So this is where you arrange the colors that you're going to use. I usually just think about it in this context, right? Something like this actually works for me. I use this style guide quite a lot. So you think about the brand colors that you'll be using. A lot of brands actually use at most three colors. So you want to identify the primary color for that brand and the secondary color as well. So once you're done with that, you identify other states colors. Usually you just use whatever you see on the brand guide. If you think maybe this yellow is not yellow enough, you can just make it yellow. But error states tend to be red. So whatever shade of red you decide to go with, you can make it redder if that's a word. You can make it less. You can add maybe tint or shade to change the color of that red. Any of this. So info as a state would be for maybe something like links. If you want to show that something is a link, you can use this color for that kind of thing. Could be a text or whatever. You can also not use colors. You can decide to just underline it. But that's why we have this one here. Then this is a success button if you're trying to design maybe a success page, successful or whatever, you could use the green one for it. We also have a warning color, and then we have the error state. So another thing you have to think about is you have to find your black and whites, and to find your black and white, you have to decide if you're going to be building for light mode or dark mode or both. So if you're going to be doing for white mode, light mode basically, so you need to have more blacks for your text. and more grays, right? So you arrange your blacks. Usually, nobody should be using like this black for text 0000. It's not appropriate because it just has too much contrast. You want to use a black that is not that, it's not exactly 000, whatever, any shade of black, as long as it's not 00, should work for you. So you organize your blacks, you organize your white. You want to have pure white. You also want to have an off white. You could also categorize that under the gray section, but I usually have whites and off whites. So you have your grays as well. These colors, you could either pick them from a style guide or you can pick them from a design system, right? So I always recommend that anybody who is trying to design something complex like a full project or whatever, you need to have a design system that you would like to use so that some of these colors you don't have to start guessing if it's nice or not. You can just pick them out on your own. So a couple of ways you can pick these colors. If, for example, let's say you want to design on a dark screen, let's make this dark. See, so let's get the text, click on T, and then type something. It's probably going to be dark. Let's see. Yeah, so now we have, this one is just pure white, right? This is just pure white. So this color kind of works. Now you want to look for another kind of color that's going to go well with this, that's going to blend well with this, and that could become your gray, one of your grays at least. So you want to look for a shade of gray. Um, there's a tool actually that you can use to get this instead of guessing it like this, right? There's a tool you can use that'll still make sense. This works. So let's say you want to use that regular and maybe reduce it, whatever. So these two things can form your colors. Now you get the color out of this one, obviously just pure white for the text, and then a shade which is gray for the text as well. So you could have this, and then you could have actually there's this thing that a lot of designers do. Let me see if I can do it here. Um, how they go about getting their grays and all of that. So um, let's just do something like this. Let's make it all black, anyways. Now this is 100% opacity. For this one, you want to maybe reduce. You want to reduce it by say 20. So you could have 80%. Looks like that. This one you might want to reduce it by for that 20. So you have what, 60, right? 60%. Can you guys hear me? Let me be sure. All right. So this one you reduce it by an extra 60, you get 40. So you could do this like this to just get like a wide range of colors that you can use for your black and gray. So you don't necessarily need to have like distinct two places for black and gray. You just use this type of thing. Wow, I'm hearing myself now. What happened? Okay. Maybe Nelly, you can mute. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I think that works. Thank you. So you can use this method where you just you know reduce the opacity a bit gradually, and then you can get the colors. But then you don't use this type. You don't have to use this color because if you use this color, it's I don't know. It actually works, not like it doesn't work, but it just stresses out the developer because this is still black, as you can see. If the developer is trying to inspect this element, they'll still see it as black, and then they'll see the opacity 60%. So you can do this, or you can just give them their normal colors. So instead of using the opacity, you can, this one is already 100%, so you leave it. Then this one, you try to copy that color. So it's going to get the exact color. Oh, it didn't get the exact color. Let's zoom in very well. You click on I to get the copy dropper. Then, okay, it doesn't really get the exact color. I was thinking this could work, but it doesn't really get the exact color. But the point I was trying to make is that you would most likely get the exact color without Um, oh yeah, it did. It did. You get the exact color without any opacity. So at 100%, it looks like that. This one at 100% looks like this. But you can see it's basically the same color. But the difference between this one and this one is that these ones do not have any opacity. They are all 100% on this side. While this one was the first one we did, where we basically just reduced the opacity in progression going like that. So that's how you get your grays and the rest. You can also use the same thing for your primary color, right? So let's say, for example, um, let me just bring this one down here. Eye, to get your eyedropper, you get the color, and then you duplicate. You guys know how to duplicate. I hope you do. You hold Alt and then you hold Shift and then you drag, so you bring it out. You don't necessarily have to hold Shift to duplicate. You can just hold Alt and drag to duplicate. But when you hold Shift, you duplicate and move it in a very particular direction. So even if my mouse is moving, because I'm holding Shift, it's just moving in a straight line. You can also move in a straight line like this, so horizontally and vertically. If I take my hands off from Shift, I can move it anywhere. So usually when you're dragging out stuff, you want to hold Shift so that you get that alignment. So let's just duplicate it and then let's try out that same thing that we did. Is how you can also get variants of your primary color. So this is 100%. We want to give this one an 80%. We want to give this one 60%. And we want to give this one a 40%. You can do it all the way till you get to like 10 or 0 or whatever. So that's how, if you've seen stuff like this on a design system or on a style guide, this is one of the easiest way to get it. All right, so once you get your colors set out, primary color, secondary color, and maybe I should just touch a bit on what these two colors mean. So usually for any brand at all, some brands tend to stick to one color. If a brand has only one color, then it's your duty to maybe discuss with the stakeholders of the clients, the stakeholders of the project, discuss with them and ask them if they would like to have some kind of secondary color that complements the primary color. If they accept, then it's your duty to find a secondary color for the project. Of course, you could have more than one colors. And one of the best ways to use colors when you're designing is by following a rule called the 60-30-10 principle. Let's see. 60-30-10 principle. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, where you want to have one color to be represented at least 60% on the user interface, and then the other color should be like 30% of it on the user interface, and then the third one should be 10. So in that case, if I have two colors and I needed to represent it in a 60-30-10 principle, I want the 60% color should be maybe the neutral color, a neutral color. So it could be, say, the background, which means you're going to see more blacks because basically the black is the background, right? If it's white, if the background is white, then easily my 60% becomes that white background. Let's keep this white. 60% becomes that white background. Then the primary color for the brand becomes the 30%. So in that case, it's going to be this guy right here. This guy becomes my 30%. And then for the 10%, you can use the complementary color that you created or the secondary color. So click on I and get this one. So in that case, you can do something like this. So basically, when you're using this in your design, you want to make sure that a lot of things tend to use, the background is white, obviously, and then things like, say, card outlines, a bit of text here and there. You can use this color to denote those elements so that it just stays consistent with the brand. Then this one, you want to use it as little as possible. So you could use it for things like, say, buttons. Of course, you still use this for buttons, for important buttons, but maybe where you have two buttons, you can have one of them like this and the other one like this. So that's how to use the 60-30-10 principle. Now let's go to the next thing on creating a style guide. We want to think about your typography. Now, Typography is very important because when you're dealing with a lot of user interfaces, whether it's a website or you're building an app, it's very important to consider typography. And one of the things you consider when you want to build out your typography is that you have to do your research first of all and make sure that the font that you're picking or the typeface you're picking looks, it has to somehow work with the brand. It has to go well with the brand. You can't have an important financial app you're building and then you're using a very playful font for it. It's not going to look real. It doesn't really make any sense. So you want to make sure you use the right typography for your design. So one of the things you consider when building out a typography is you need to create a type scale basically. So like what we have here is called a type scale. And no, these numbers are not just random. They were actually created with um, you know, there's a science to it, right? So you could either go to a website called let's see if I remember this website. Can you guys still see my screen just to be sure? Okay, here it is, typescale.com. You could either go to typescale.com to get a typeface for your design. So what you can do is that when you come to this place, you put in a base size, right? Now there's something called the 8 points grid. I should probably start with that first. The 8 points grid is a very simple method for it's a very simple tool, but very efficient tool for keeping your designs consistent. You can use it in a lot of things. You can use it in typography, you can use it in spacings, you can use it in layouts, you can use it in a lot of things that you're doing in terms of designs. So the 8 point grid basically says that if you have a base number of 8, for example, then you can have other progressions in multiples of 8, right? So let's say I have 8 here. Um, then I can have, okay, I think it's in multiples of two rather. Sorry, in multiples of two. So I can always multiply every number by two to get the next number, like that, like that. So by the time I've done that, I'm going to get some kind of consistent progression that I can work with. So let's say we do this, right? So we get 16. If we multiply this one by two, we should get 32. If we multiply this one by 2, we should get 64. And if we multiply this one by 2, we should get 128, like that. So now you can just go on, but it depends on what you're going to use it for, right? So if you want to make your designs to be very consistent, especially text or whatever, you might want to have your text to align with some of these things. So you could use it as the base one. I think a lot of people actually use 16 because if you're creating a website, 16 is like the basic. Um, a lot of body text on websites are 16, either 16 or 18. So anything lesser than that could just be, very tiny text that they can use to maybe describe something or use it to describe something basically. So you want to do something like this, but then this progression doesn't really give you a lot of options, right? So the 8 points grid doesn't really mean that you must always go with 8. It doesn't really mean that you can always go with 8. It just means that you can move in multiples of 2. You can also move in multiples of 4. So in between 16, 32, you could have other numbers like um you could have 18, you could have maybe 24, have 18, you could have 24, you could have 30. Um, you could also have, like a lot of them between 32 and 64. You could also have 40, you could have 48, 48, and so on. All right. So that's what you use to create your text. So if you have a text, you want to start with a base number. So let's go with 16 because 16 is the body, is mostly the body text. So anything above 16, you could call them headers. So as you can see here, they've denoted it as we have headers, heading or whatever, and then we have body text. So you want to make 16 your base text. And then anything lower than that, let's make this 16. Let's see how it looks. It's probably going to be very small. All right, it's small. So let's call this hello world. So anything less than 16, yes, we could have 8. Or we could even have, maybe instead of having 8, we could try 12 first, right? So we could have 12 because it's also in multiples of 2 and 4s. And then after 12, we could maybe have 8. So 8. So you could use these three as, say, these are the body text. And then for the headers, you could have, after 16, we can decide to have 18 if we want to, right? And because they are headers, they need to not just be regular. So you can use maybe bold or semi-bold, whatever, or medium in this case, which, okay, I'm using inter, whatever. So this one is 18. So let's give this one a, let's just say 24. Let's give this one a 24. Let's give this one a 32. So basically, there's no end to this. You can make it as big as you want and as small as you want. But usually, when I'm doing a website, on the hero section where we have large text and then body text, I try to keep the large text to around 72. I like to keep it around 72. The highest I think I've ever gone is around 96. So let's say we've gotten to that point where we have 72. This is how this would look like. Let's see. 72. All right. So with this now, you can separate them, and you know that anytime you're trying to design, and you want to write a body text, you're basically looking for things below 16, 16 and below. So you don't. I think you can also do 18. Um, you could do 18 as well, but because it's quite close to 16, it's just 2 pixels difference. But 16 is the perfect one. So you could go lower if you need to use some kind of description underneath a small text, already small text. And then if you need headers, you just look upwards. So that's it for typography. Um, then another thing you have to consider for typography, sorry, is that you have to now consider how they will be used. So we have all of these things. We have some of them as bold. We have some of them as medium. You want to create them for different um, you want to create different styles out of them. What do I mean? So if you're considering 16, for example, let's just bring 16 out. You could have, depending on the typeface you've chosen. So this typeface I'm using here is Inter. And for Inter, we have a lot of them. We have all the way from thin to black. For some typeface, you might not see something like that. Let's say, for example, have it off. I don't have that. Um, I'm trying to think of a typeface that doesn't have a lot of, let's say, space go checks. Okay, space. Oh no. For space go checks, you see we have just light, regular, medium, and bold. So you want to build out your typeface those for these instances, for these styles. So basically, for 16, let's pick 16 first. We have a regular. We also need to have 16 as a medium. We also need to have 16 as bold. All right. So you might not use all of these, but it's just important to have them just in case you want to use them so that everything will still be consistent. So you could call this one the 16. So I think there's a better way to represent things like this, but yeah, whatever. So we have 16 for that one. Um, you could come again and say, okay, let's assume we use just this one. So let's do for 32. Where's 32? Should be this one. All right, so we have 32 here. So 32. Align it. Let's make sure it's aligned. So for 32, you want to have 32 as a regular. which you might never use, but it's just important to have it. So you want to have it for um oh, okay. I think I didn't change the font. Let me just change the font. You don't have to do it for everything. In cases of fonts that have a lot of things like this, has a lot of font types. You just have to pick out a few. So let's say for this one, since it has just a wide array, I don't want to use all of them. I could just say, okay, I'm going to make them for regular, medium, semi bold, and bold. I don't need extra bold and black, right? So you don't have to make it for everything you see on the typeface. You just make it for the ones you think you're going to use. So I'm just going to make this one for medium and make this one for semi bold and make another one for bold. There you go. So you can do it like that. Another way, but then one thing about setting up a design system, setting up a style guide rather, is that you've probably seen stuff like this and you're wondering how people got this kind of thing, how they got to arrange the colors like this, how they got to arrange the headings like this or the text like this. They use something called styles. So they create styles out of them. So let's say after you've arranged these things, now you should probably create a style out of it so that you can delete this and still have them in your design, and then you can use them easily wherever you want. So how to do that is that let's say this is 16. Let's pick this one, and now we have 16 for regular, we have it for medium, and we have it for um, bold. Okay, before I do that, I need to explain one more thing that you have to do with your type. Can you guys see the screen very well? I think I was too far away. I need to move this back. Okay, so one more thing you have to consider when building out your type is something called the line height, right? Sometimes you see text and then the line height is just too long. It doesn't really make any sense why it's that long. So in cases like this, you also need to set your line height, and you can do so using the same 8 points grid. So you can decide that okay, the bigger they get, the different line height you use. So let's say this is 16. Let's see how a 16 line height would look like. It's probably going to be very small. Let's see. It's small, so we can decide to make it maybe 18, maybe 24, or whatever. So if you're using 24, so all of 16 would be 24. So this one and this one, you can have 24 as well. And by the time you've done stuff like this, it just makes it easy to align all the text. So for maybe font 18, you can also use this 24 as the line height as well. It also goes well. Just make sure that your line height is not just a random number. It's because when you're using grids on your website, if your line height on your text are not aligned, then you're going to have, let's say you're using two texts, you're trying to align two texts horizontally. They basically just align with the line height, as you can see. If you try to get a ruler to check this, you can see that text align with the line height. So you want to make sure that you have the same line height for them. All right. So for bigger text, obviously, 24 might not work well for it. You see, it's just really hugging it. So you might want to use a bigger number on the 8 points grid. So let's try 32 and see how it looks like for this one. So we go 32. You see, it gives it a bit of space, so it's good. So there you go. So once you've done that, then you can now go ahead to create things like this. I think these ones are here already because these guys, they did something like that. You can see. Let me see. You can see it here. It's being used here already. So that's why when I'm not clicking anything on this file, I get to see all of these things. So if you're using a new file, for example, let me just open a new file and show you how it would look like. So let's get these guys. It's dark. I don't want it to be dark. All right. So now you're clicking outside, you're not seeing anything because this is a new file and you don't have any kind of library imported here. So let's create our own text styles right now. So this is 16 regular. To create a text style, you just click on this button right here. You click on style. First of all, when you click on that style, it tends to look for the styles that you currently have. Maybe like some of these styles you're seeing, this one is for a CEX. This is a project I worked on, and I created a lot of text styles for it, as you can see. So I created them for regular, medium bold, semi bold, and the rest of them. I just, as it keeps going down, you see how big it is. So when you click on that style, the first thing it wants you to do is to see if maybe you want to pick an existing style. If you don't want to pick an existing style and you want to create a style out of what you have here, you just click on the plus. So once you click on the plus, you can create a style. So this one it was 16 regular, as you can see here. So we can just say, um, you can use any kind of convention. You can say 16 stroke regular, right? So once you've done something like that, you can see that each time you click that font, you get this, right? So let's say I had a random text somewhere. Let's just make this really big. Say I had a random text somewhere, and it just makes you design faster. So you're designing stuff and you know that this thing is not going to have this text that you've done. This text is currently 150.9, and you don't have that kind of 150.9 size in your type scale. So you can simply come here to this text style and pick that one that you've already created. So I want this font to look like this guy right here. So the first thing I do is I click on that one that I want to use, and then I click on this text style, and then I pick this one, and you see it just aligns. So it makes it really easy to align a lot of things that way. So the same way you created this one, you're also going to create for this one. Let me just go ahead and do that. So I'm creating another one. Oh, and then sorry, one more thing is that I think it's really good that when you're creating your textiles, you give it some kind of name first. So just using 16 regular wasn't really that good. So let's do another one so that you see what I mean. So you want to give it the name of the project, for example, or something you can use to identify it. So I could say, let's say the name of this project is Spotlight. I could say SPL slash 16 slash reg. So yeah, you can see that under okay, hold on, sorry, let me do that again. Yeah, slash 16. Okay, let's just have just one slash because the first one is going to be used as the name of that style. So it's going to be used as the name of that style, and then the other ones are the styles. So the styles under that name. So you have SPL slash 16 reg, and then let's call this one, this is medium. So let's have X SPL slash SPL slash 16 medium. So by doing it like this, instead of doing it the other way, the first way I did it is that you can see everything organized under one you can see everything organized under one name. So you can see SPL. So in cases where maybe you're working, maybe you have more than one textile on this page, on this canvas, it will be very easy for you to find the one you're looking for. So so there you go. Let's say you want to change this one to this other one, this other style, because I've created two styles under SPL. When you open here, you see SPL, and then you see 16 red, you see 16 medium, and so on and so on. So if I want to change this one to say maybe 16 medium, I just click on it and it's changed to 16 medium. I can also change it back by clicking here and then going back. So you can create all these textiles for 16 and create the same thing for 32. So let's create for 32. So since everything is still under the same project, SPL slash 32. What was it? I think, sorry, 32 regular. So this one is a medium. So we go here, click on the plus. We have SPL slash 2 medium. Sorry. Okay. So we have medium. We go for this one. This is semi bold. So we have. Ah, sorry. We just got the light, so the fan is really. Okay. So this one is what? This is semi bold. So click on the plus. We have SPL slash 32 semi bold. maybe. So now whenever you click on any of them and then you click on their name, you are going to see them organized under SPL. So you organize them like that from the smallest to the biggest. And let's say you didn't do 12 first, and now you see, oh, I think I needed to do 12. Right. So let's bring this down and see how you can organize it so it's easy for you to pick them up. So let's detach it. This is what you use to detach. You click on text style, and then you click on this button to detach it. So it's now like a normal text, and you can change it however you want. So let's say we want these ones to go down to 12. So they still retained their font type. So this is bold, this is medium, and this is regular. But now everything is 12, as you can see here. So I can now go ahead and create my text styles for 12. Click on this plus SPL slash 12 reg. So this one plus SPL slash 12. What was it? Was it medium? I think it was. Yeah. And this one, you go plus SPL slash 12 bold, or was it semi bold? I don't remember. Whatever. So with that now, you can see that if you're not clicking anything and you check SPL, you see that it's supposed to start from 12, but we have 12 at the bottom here because it's just the last one you did. You can move it here, right? You can just move it upwards and put the medium under it and put the semi bold right under it. So this it helps you to see if I can delete that. It's not part of this. It's the first ones I did. So it helps you to organize your text. So wherever you are on the page and you're designing, you can just create a random text and then quickly align it to the style that you're using for your design. So that's it for text. Does anybody have any question before I continue? Anyone? Okay, yeah. So this is the first. This is actually the easiest way to do it. Just creating it yourself and adding it to your style like this. But if you're using that website, which is this type skill, you just come here and pick a base font style, say 12, font size rather, say 12. Let's say 12. So you want to go with 12. Then it gives you lower values and also gives you higher values. Now the higher values become your headings, and then the lower values from here become your text, your body text. So what you do here is that this type scale website doesn't really. The only thing it does, I say it does, is that it just helps you create a type scale very fast. It's basically the same thing that we've done all the way here, where we created all of this. Yes. So you still have to take these dimensions from here. You still have to take these dimensions from here and build them out on Figma. So what you can do is maybe you can take a screenshot of it once it has given you that, and then you use it to build out the same thing. So that's why I skipped it first so that I could just show you later, right? But one thing why I don't like using this method is because you tend to not have the exact values that you would like to use if you were using an 8 points grid. You can see how we're having decimals 36.62, 29.30, and all of that. So it's not like the developers won't be able to get these exact values. So it just makes it a bit harder. You get. So, but the point here is that whatever scale you're using, the way scales work is in progression. Whatever scale you're using, you just use that increment and keep going. So that's why they have all of these decimals. So you could either use any of them. If I see a person's design and I'm seeing decimals there, I don't like it. That's just my opinion. That's just how I approach design. But if the person is able to justify how they got that type of sizes, maybe they tell you that okay, they use 12 pixels um, as the base font size, then they maybe tell you that they generated it using that website. Then it just makes sense, right? You could just see how it goes up all the way up. So that's it for for that one. Does anybody have any other question? Any question? Yeah, go ahead. What's what? The plugin. This no. This is Figma. You're talking about this page, like these things, or which one? Oh yeah, it's a style guideline. I got it from the community, so I'm just using it to explain how to get style guides working. So once you've decided, and you can see now that if you want to build a website or you want to do any kind of design, basically, you don't just jump right into it. So you usually tell the client that they will give you a few weeks to, get started. And one of the things you're doing in those times is that you're doing your user research and you're also getting your style guide ready. Or at least, if you don't want to build a style guide, you need to get a design system that you'd like to work with, so that when you start prototyping and when you start sketching and prototyping, everything looks good. So after you have done your text, your typography, the next thing you need to consider is iconography. I hope you guys remember everything we talked about here. You pick the font, the text type first. You pick the type you want to use, say Inter in this case, and then you start arranging it. You pick a base font. You use 8 point grid. You pick a base font, say 16, and then you start arranging it upwards in progression to get your headers, and then you arrange it downward to get your body text, right? And then when you're done with that, you pick a consistent line height so that your text don't look all scattered. So once you've picked your line height, then you can make them into textiles for your page, for your design. So that's just 4 steps. Maybe you can record that down somewhere. Yes, come in. Sorry, guys, someone is up to my door. Come in, come in, come in. Okay, so with that, sorry, hold on. Let me get to them. Yes, yes, come in, please. Come in, come in. Yes. How can it be closed like that? Welcome. Hi, how are you? Hello. I'm on a call soon. Yeah. All right, guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. So let's continue. So yes, those are the 4 steps you take when you are building out your typography for your design. And then the next thing I want to talk about is sorry, hold on a second. The next thing I want to talk about is the iconography. Exactly. Yeah, so iconography is simple. You don't have to build out your icons yourself. You just get an icon from maybe you can get it from the community as a kit, an icon kit that you'd like to use. So for example, myself, I like this view sax, which is why I kept it here, first of all. So I like view sax because they have both field and two tones, and they have just outlines. So one thing I see a lot of designers making mistakes when they're starting out with their designs is that they tend to mix icons. So they could use icon from this page, from this icon kit, and then they use another icon from another icon kit. So you see icons that they don't look the same. They look different, and it just makes the design messy. Also, some of them might use icons from the same icon set, but then you see some of them are filled, and then the other ones are outlined, and maybe the other ones are two tone. No, you have to pick one. So if you're going to use outlined icons, you have to make sure that you use outlined icons for everything you're using on that design. So that's all. I can share this with you guys. Um, an icon set might not have all of the icons that you envisage it to have. So in that case, you just have to think outside the box to look out for what would work. So there's always something that can replace something. You get. So let's say you were going to look for, let me just use a home button for example. So in this case, it has two home buttons. If you don't see maybe this type of home button, let's say you don't see a home button here at all, You can decide to look for another star icon kit, or you can decide to look for something else in that your icon kit that might still replace a home button. All right, that might still look like a home icon. At least it will represent home. So that's the idea there. So once you've picked a an icon kit, you can then proceed to the next step. So we have view sacks. You can also get an icon kit from the community. This is the community. So I just want to go back. Why is it not going back? Okay. Um, so let's go back to the community and let's look for icons. Okay, you can even click it here. It's one of the most search things. So you see other icon kits that you can use. This one has 98K users. So it's obviously something a lot of people use. Let's check it out. Let's duplicate to see how it works. Of course, you don't have to duplicate everything. You can just wait for it to load up and then you can review it for yourself. Assuming they are free. So you see, this one has all of these things. It has both outlined and filled icons. So whichever one you decide to go with, that's fine. So they have arrows and devices, navigation, brands. The brands are the most useless ones, but yeah, anyways. So another thing you can do is to work with the plugin. You could get an icon plugin. Let's even get it from the community. So let's go to plugins and let's say feather icons. You guys have probably heard of feather icons. Right, so feather icons are mostly outlined. I have it installed. So I have feather icons installed here. I can just search icons and see what comes up under plugins, right? So we have icon styles, we have icon to code, we have icons, feather icons, we have ant icons. Wow, ant icon has a plugin. So you can install that as well. Let me just install it. I think it's cool. And it's installed. So while you're working and then you want to get an icon, you could just right click, go to plugin and look for that icon plugin that you've downloaded or you've installed. So in this case, ant icon, you wait for it to load. Let's see how it works. All right, so you could just search. Does it have a search? It doesn't have a search feature. Okay, so it's shitty. But usually, when I started out, I used this one called Iconify. And Iconify is brilliant because it's in its own, it's like a collection list. It has other icon styles. So it has material, it has Google material icon inside, and every other icon style there. So it even has ant design icons inside of it. So that's why I use material. That's why I used Iconify. But the problem with Iconify is that if you are searching for a particular thing, it doesn't really unless maybe you select you select a particular icon style to search in, it's just going to aggregate answers replies from all of these icon styles. So you're going to see filled icons, you see outlined ones. Some of them will be tick, some of them will not be tick. So now if you're using Iconify, it gives you a lot of options, but you have to be smart in using it so that you don't just pick any icon that it gives you, because you can see where all of them are coming from. So some of them is coming from carbon, and maybe you can sort it here. Let's see. So if you click on carbon, you get only one of it, right? Okay. All right. So you can get Iconify from the community section as well. Let's see if it's here. Iconify, it's here. So you can install it and use it. It has 1 million installs. So it's very good. So yeah, that's it. Once you've picked out the icon, you just maybe open it and keep it somewhere, right? You just open it and keep it somewhere. So whenever you need to get something, say you're designing something and you need a particular icon, you can come here and look for it. You can also click on the assets panel and search for it. So let's say I want an arrow. You're going to get a lot of arrows from this page. And if you click on any of them, it's going to highlight it on the page. Just zoom out and you see where it's highlighted, and then you can go there to see the arrows. So this is the arrow page. You might not get answers for everything you're searching. So you just have to just try other keywords, because it's dependent on how the person who created this icon set saved the names, right? So That's how I use icons. I get my icons from here and then I use them on my design. So another thing you have to consider is your grid system. So let's talk about grid systems now. Now, if you're going to work with grid systems, you have to consider um, the device in which the interface will be used on. So it could be used on a laptop, for example, that's a desktop. It could be used on a tablet, and it could also be used on a mobile device. So you have to look for grid systems that work with those devices. Most designers don't necessarily design for tablets; they just design for desktop and mobile. So in that case, I'll just give you the grid system that I use for both desktop and mobile, and then I'll show you how I got them. All right. So if you're doing your grid system, where's that place? Let's go back there. If you're building out a grid system, you should also use the 8 points grid system, or you use something called the 3 point grid system. I'm not going to talk about that one. I usually just use the 8 point grid system. What I'll do is that I'll give you guys a video that basically goes in depth and explains the 8 points grid system and there's so much noise. The 8 points grid system and the 3 points grid system. So in this case now we'll just go with the 8 point grid system to build out our grid. So let's click F and then let's pick out the desktop page. We have our desktop here. Now when you want to add a grid, you just come here and click on layout grid. So this is how you add your grid system. Click your layout grid, and then it gives you both vertical and horizontal grids, but we don't want to work with that. We mostly work with columns because when you're building out a user interface, the flow is from up to down, right? So you go columns. So after selecting out columns, the three most important thing here is the count, the width, the count, the margin, and the gutter. Those are the three most important things. Now, for a lot of websites, if you're building out the desktop page, they tend to use a count of 12. That's because it makes it easy to divide the screen. It's just Bootstrap's format, and a lot of developers use Bootstrap, which is the reason why when you're learning designs, you have to also consider how developers would be able to implement your designs. So a lot of them use 12 points grid. In that case, you give it a count of 12. So if you count these grids, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Right. So there you go. Now you also have to consider the margin, and if you use your grid system, this your 8 points grid system, you could get 128. Right. So let's see 128. A lot of people actually don't use 128. They could just adjust it to maybe 150, or they could leave it as 120. But I use 128. So you click 128, and then you get this. So basically, what this thing does is that it helps the developer know that, okay, anything they are building out, whatever you have on this page, it won't get past these lines. It won't get past these lines. It helps you align your contents on your web page. So in case you have a larger screen, everything will just move. Everything would scale out equally. So in this case now, because this type of column is set to stretch, if I try to stretch it, you see how it just stretches out, you know, in small bits. You see that it just maintains that same gutter, it maintains the margin. So at every point in time, from the last grid to the edge of the screen will always be 128 margin. The same for this one as well. So it just stretches out and maintains that same thing. The only thing that changes is the size of the grid. They just tend to increase, but the gutter, the margin, and the count is always the same. Okay. So with that, then the gutter, usually some people do is that they divide the margin by 5 to get the gutter. But in my case, I just like using 30. So you said 30. Now, these values that I use there, it's not like, I just use them anyhow, right? So they are also part of Material Design's system. So you might want to check out that out later. I'll drop a link to the grid system in material design. So you see the recommended grid settings that they have. So you could use 12, 128, 30. You could also use 12, 150, 30. In which case, it's just to change the margin. So 150, it looks like this. So it means the margin from the first grid and the last grid to the edge of the screen is 150. Then the margin is, the gutter is 30. So you could use that. Um, so yeah, that's it. That's how you set up your grid system. And that's for desktop. Then for mobile, okay, let's do that. Let's get a mobile frame. For mobile phones, I advise you don't use the largest screen that you see there. Just use something that a lot of people use. I tend to go with um is someone join? Okay. So when I'm building out on a phone, I tend to go with a small screen, right? I tend to go with iPhone 10 because it has a width of 375. It's not as big as iPhone 13 Pro Max. Don't use big screens because if you use big screens, then when you have a small screen, you're going to have issues. People are going to have issues with using your app. So in this case, I just come out with an iPhone 10 or 11 Pro because of the small size of 375, which a lot of Android phones have as well. All right. So for this one now, you want to use four. You can use four. You can use two. And if you see that if you keep dividing this number from the 8 points grid, you're going to arrive at four eventually. Right? If you divide by two, you get eight. If you divide by eight, you get four. So in that case, come out here, you turn on your layout grid, and you set it to column, and you reduce the count to four. Now the margin, what should the margin be? For me, I like having 16 as the margin. So whatever content I have on the page, they would not cross that line. The margin from the edge to the last grid would be 16 for me. So I use 16. Some people use 24, but I think that's just a waste of space. Some people use 24. Some people use 30, but 16 is just, it's okay. All right. So you can go with 16. Then the gutter you could leave it as 20. It doesn't really matter. Anything that you have inside here doesn't really matter except when you're considering maybe building out ships. Let's say you're building out cards and then you want like three cards to be here, then 12 is just perfect. You know that if you have three, oops, for example, if you have three cards here, are you guys hear this noise from the background? Someone is turning on the generator in my place. Yeah. So in this case, you could just have three cards like that, and it just makes sense to want to organize your gutter in this case. But it doesn't really matter because in a mobile screen, most things are usually just stacked on each other, or they have some kind of scroll feature attached to it, so you can either slide cards from right to the left hand side to see more cards, or you just keep scrolling to see more cards to see more content on the page. So with that, we have, let me see what we have here in our grid. We have 4, 16, and 20. I'm going to share this document so you guys can go through it later on. Okay, we could also have 2, like I mentioned earlier. So you could have 2, 16, 20. Okay. Any question? Want to leave at 16. Doesn't matter. Any question, guys? No question. Okay. So basically, once you've set out your grid system, when you want to design, you set up your grid system for desktop, you set it up for phones. Let me set it up for tablets. Let's see how it's going to look like for tablets. I'm sorry. We go to tablets, and I like working with this one because it's just in between the biggest and the smallest at least. So 11, iPad Pro 11. That's one. And for tablets, you want to use a count of eight. Don't use 12. Don't use four either. Just use eight. It's all in between, right? You can see it still maintains that 8 point grid. So you click on layout grid. You go to columns. You keep your counts to eight. And For the margin and the gutter, for the margin, you can decide to use 64, which is also part of the 8-point grid system. And for the gutter, you can leave it like that. You can leave it at 20 if you want. You can also reduce it to, say, 16 if you want to. So just make sure that some of the values that you're using for this, and this, they kind of like fall into the 8-point grid system. They just make it look nicer. All right, so this is the configuration for tablets. Let me just leave it there so you can get where I got it from, that particular frame. So that's it for grid systems. And I don't know if you have any question if I move on to spacing. Anyone? So everybody understands what I'm saying since. Okay. All right. So the next thing we want to go to is reading out our space system, our um, space. So we built out our grid system. Now let's build out our spacing. So spacing is very important because when you are working on, say, a screen rest, I had a screenshot earlier. Where is it? Okay, I put it in practice file. So when you have something like this, you're probably wondering how they decided to give this a space of, this one should be exactly where it is. What's the distance between here and that's this text and this rectangle that we have here, this square or rectangle that we have there. And what's the difference? What's the space between this one and the next section? What's the space in between this one and the next section? In fact, this is seen as a section, right? Because it looks like the space between here from this place to this place is bigger than the space between here and here. So I think it's spacing kind of works with the law of proximity in designs, which kind of states that if you have elements that are closer to each other, then they are perceived as a group. So it's a UX rule, and UX has to do with studying user behavior and how they would interact with your product. So if someone is looking at this website or this say this page, for example, on mobile, and they see the description, and then they see that the text underneath the description is very close to the description text than it is with any other element, you can tell that this part is a group on its own. You can also tell that this part, you could just say this part is a group on its own. In fact, I like to see things in rectangles. I like to see anything that has to do with designs in terms of rectangles. So in this case, you could say this is a rectangle. Say this entire place is a rectangle. This entire space is a rectangle. And then inside this rectangle, we have other rectangles, right? So inside this rectangle, we have a rectangle here. We have another rectangle here. You guys get, right? So, and then this one is also another section, and I like to see it as a rectangle. So, seeing things in rectangles just help you arrange your work. It helps you make your work clean. And then you can also see this part as another rectangle. So, in this case, you could say we have how many sections here? This entire part is also a rectangle. So, you could add this one to it. Let's just add this entire space to it. So in this case, how many sections are we seeing here? We have, oops, sorry. We have one, two, three, four, and five. We have five sections or five groups for this UI. For this one, how many sections or groups do we have here? We could say this entire place is one group. And of course, inside that group, we have this as a group, and then we have this other big card as a group, and then we have the other bigger card inside as a group. But this entire section can be seen as a group, and then this other section can be seen as another group. It's all rectangles, you guys see. And then this one can also be seen as another group. So now, when you're considering spaces, you're considering the spaces in between groups, number one. So you're considering the spaces between groups. So group one and group two, what's the space in between? You just want to make sure that for every group you have, you can say for every group that are related, they should have a consistent grouping, right? So, and then for this last part, we have another group underneath here. There's no point drawing that. But you guys can see how things just move in groups. So for spacings, let me just write some short notes. Spacings, we consider the following. So one, we consider, um, first of all, we consider spacings between, who is that? Someone is trying to join us. Okay. Hello, Glory. Did she join? Can't see her. Okay. So for spacings, the first thing is that we consider spacings between groups. What did I do? That's the wrong thing. So we consider spacings between groups. Want them to be consistent, except when you want to make that group different. In this case, you can see that this group, this entire group rather, this group and this group, they have the same space. I think, okay, they don't have the same space with this group, but that's a flaw. So this group, and this group, they're supposed to have the same space. You can see how this group is now farther apart from this group. So you can also say that this entire place is an entire group as well. So let's say, let me make an example. So you could say this place can be seen as a bigger group, right? Because all the spacings inside this group are consistent. So for spacings, we consider space between groups that's one group from one group to another, and then we consider spaces in between groups. Between, say in between elements in a group, between elements in a group. We also consider spacings inside an icon. Want to make sure your icon is consistent. We also consider spacings from one icon to the other, which is basically between elements in a group. So if you have an icon here and then you have another icon, or you have an icon and a text between beside it, what's the space between that icon and that text, and what's the space between any other icon and a text in that your design? So they have to be consistent. So we could say between icons and text. This number four is the same thing as this one, right? Because you're considering between elements in a group. So it could be an icon and a text, or an icon and an icon, or a text and a text. Right. So you consider that. Another thing we consider our spacing is in between header and body. So for text, we consider them between header and body. Okay. Now the sixth one is that we consider our spacing between for line heights. We've already talked about the line heights, right, guys? For line height in a text. So when you have a text like this, that part where we um, fix the line height, which is this place, it's always set to automatic because it just moves. We fix the line height for a block of text. Now, line height doesn't have to do with just a single line of text alone. It also deals with a block of text. So in this case, let's see what we have here. We have 15. Now, if you have a group of text, it means that a single text here is going to have a line height of 15. Let me see. Has a line height of 15. 15 should be 16, right? So for this one, let's say this is a group of text. You want to align it to correspond with the 8 points grid. So let's give it 16. So you don't just I've seen people do stuff like this where they move text, or they come here and they just reduce it anyhow they want, or increase it anyhow they want, and it just has arbitrary numbers. So if you're going to keep it around 20, then maybe use 24, or maybe use 18. Yes. So always keep it consistent to that 8 point grid. I guess one thing you guys will learn today is that 8 point grid is very important. It's used for a lot of things. All right. So we also consider it for line heights, as I have written here. So we've already talked about line heights. Let's talk about between headers and body text. So I'll go to this place where we already have our styles, and we are going to pick a text for header, and then we're going to pick a text for body text. So let's just write a random text. Um, Let me think of a good. Okay, let's just say. Yeah, basically just writing what I see here. Right. So I want this to be a header text. I just wrote a random text, and it has a size of 16 and it's regular. So I want it to be header. So I go here and I pick the styles that I've already selected. The highest one I have so far is 32. So let's just use 32. All right. Now let's write a body text. Um, let's write a body text. So let's just use lorem ipsum. So in case you guys don't know, you can have a plugin for generating text, so you don't have to just think of what to write. You can just generate them. You go to the community, go to plugin, and look for this one. Where is it? Lorem ipsum. So it allows you to generate a random block of text. So you could generate three sentences, you could generate just three words, you could generate three paragraphs, whatever. So let's say I want to generate three sentences. I just click generate. So the first thing you do is you highlight that text that you want to change into that thing, right? So now I've generated my text. It's three sentences. So let me just reduce it a bit. And now let's make it a body text. Right, so I'll try to use 16 regular. And that's good. Now, one more thing I have to talk about when you're building out text is that try not to make your text have something called an orphan text. I see it in UI designs a lot, and I don't know if it has some kind of consequences, but the way I learned with some kind of print. So if you see a book, you don't see stuff like this. You don't see them do stuff like, oh, I can't do it. You don't see them have something like this where they have just one text underneath. Oh, bad, where they have just one text underneath. So this is an orphan text and it's bad. Instead of having one text, one word underneath, it's better you have like two. Two is better, three is better even, right? So this is fine. Having just one text is not fine. Right? All right, so we have this, we have our body text, and then we have our layout text, our header text. So what would be the spacing in between? Now that's where we use the 8-point grid system. So already what we have here is 24. You can bring it down a bit. You can say 8. It will still look okay. You can decide to use 4. You can decide to use 2. Right. So if you use this kind of spacings for um you know for anything at all, if you stay consistent with your spacing, you're going to have a very consistent design. Does anybody have any question before I continue? Yeah, you could use. I think there are also, you could have a different scenario where you might have to give a bigger space. But for me, what I do is that whatever I use, if I'm using two, I'm going to stick to that two. I'm just going to use that two everywhere. So anywhere I'm supposed to have a header and a body text underneath it, I just make sure that I use the same space. So it makes it very consistent. So that if you're looking at this place and then you're looking at this place, you're seeing the same thing. All right. Another thing designers do to make sure they stay consistent is that maybe if they build out their first, let's say they build out their first header and text like this, you could just turn it into a component, right? Just create it as a component and leave it outside or whatever. And then you duplicate it and use the duplicate one in your design. So anytime you need to build out a header and a text, you just pick out this one and use. And if you need to make changes to everything, let's say you decide, I don't think this space is really that good. It's just two. Maybe I should increase it a bit. I should make it four. Then you go to your main component and you can increase it. and if you increase it in your main component, all the other instances where it's being used in your design, they adjust as well. So you can see this one has adjusted to 4. So keep it consistent. If you're using 2 as the spacing for between your text, between your header and body text, keep it as that. So now you also do the same thing for your icons. Let's get 2 icons here and see how they will work. Let's just say this one, and this one. Right. When you're building out icons, um, let me just remove they have components inside of them. Let me detach them so that it's easy to see. Now, when you're working with icons, you have to be careful because every icon has, they are usually bordered by a frame. They have a frame, bordering them, each of them. Like this one is 24. And if you're going to use, if you're always, exactly, if you're getting icons from a particular icon set, then all of them are going to have the same consistent frame. But for your designs, they might look too big. I've seen an icon set where, each icons I saw was about 36. Instead of 24, it was 36 by 36, and they looked big. So I had to scale it down to 24 by 24 so that I can use it for my design. All right. So you can scale it down, but what you should not do is something like this, where let me just where you're bringing out your icons. See if I can bring this out. I cannot. Okay, let me just flatten it then. Okay, that didn't work. I was going to say that for no reason should you remove the um for no reason should you remove the this thing on outside and then just use the icon like that. Uh, this is- okay. I see people do stuff like this where they are building out a design, and then the icon doesn't come in frames. Instead, the icon just it's just an icon like that. This is wrong. You should always put it inside the frame, and the frame will always have like a bit of space between the icon outlines and the frame itself. So as you can see, this is the icon. This is where it is, but you can see where the frame starts. So if somebody tells you that you use an icon of 24 by 24, it doesn't mean that the icon itself will be that 24 by 24. It means that the frame in which the icon will be inside will be 24 by 24. So then the icon will fit inside perfectly. Now you can use auto layouts for your icon so that when you're using them, they are always consistent. What do I mean? So let me just create a frame and let me use auto layout on it. So basically, the way auto layout works for frames is that there's this new um, there's this new arrangement which makes it more visual. So you want to put things in the middle in cases of icon, and then the space between whatever is going to be in the middle and the top side is shown here as 10. You can reduce it to say 2, and you can reduce the space between the top and the bottom side to 2 as well. And okay, leave that one. So if I get an icon, this icon is not, let me just use this one, the small one that I'm seeing here. If I get this as an icon and I put it here, you can see that, it's kind of the frame resized to fit the icon, but you see that the space will always be consistent. So you see that 2, 2, 2, and 2. Right? So you don't have to use layouts, auto layouts for your icons. You can just pick icons from an icon set. They are already, like this. But in case you need to use any of them, maybe use them differently, then make sure that they are consistent. So this is 9 by 9. I don't want 9 by 9. What I want is 24 by 24. I want to use it as 24 by 24. So you can scale it. You go here, you use the scale tool, or if you don't want to use your scale to you highlight this and type in the value. So I think let's do this and let's give it a size of 24 by 24. You see the icon stays the same, but you always notice that the space between that icon and the border is always going to be 2. In this case, it's just too much, but you get the picture. All right. So always make sure that basically everything I'm trying to say here is that icons are supposed to stay inside a frame, and they should have a particular distance between them. Okay, you can leave this one like this. This one looks closer to the edge. It's still fine, right? You can still use this as long as you got them from a particular icon kit. They're always going to look the same way. All right. So that's it between inside an icon. Let's talk about between an icon and a text. So I'll just copy that text then. So you also want to define your spacing between an icon and text. And say we have this icon and we have this text. I'll align them together. And I want them to have a space of say 8. Type in 8 here and see how it looks like. Use it in your design for the first time and it doesn't look really nice, you can always maybe reduce the spacing or increase it. Sometimes when you bring text like this, you could find out that maybe the text is too small. So in that case, you might have to scale it to make it look better. All right. So 8, you can decide to go with 2, you can decide to go with 4. It doesn't matter. To make sure that if you're going to use the spacing between an icon and a text as 4, then everywhere around your design or your design, you're going to use that same consistent space for it. So for spacings, what some people usually do is that they just build out the space anyways. They use rectangles to do it. So you could come and you could start with the smallest space. Let's say, let's say this is 12 by 12. You start with the smallest space, give it a 12 by 12. All right, so this is your first space. The second space, you could decide to use, and these values are gotten from that same 12 point rule. You could decide to use 16 by 16. So we have 16 by 16. The third one, you could decide to use maybe 24 by 24. So you could build out things like this just to show. Now, you don't have to build out things like this as a designer because you can just decide on your own and maybe write it down somewhere. But why we build out things like this to add to our style guide is for the benefit of the developer too. So a developer will always know that okay, we have spaces as 12, we have spaces as 16, we have spaces as 24, we have spaces as 32 in this design, so that when they are designing, when they are building it out, do not just use whatever spacing that they like. Otherwise, you might not like the design when it's ready by the time they are done with it. All right, so you build out your space. This thing is called a spacing scale. What I'm doing now is called a spacing scale. So we could have this one as 64, and we can have this one as say 128, whatever. Okay, now you have spacing. So whenever you want to space between, say, elements in a group, you can decide to use, say, let's use 12 for elements between a group. So in that case, if I'm doing something like, just say, let's just say I'm building out the card. I'd like to build out the card right now. Let's just say I'm building out the card, and I'd like to give it a fill. As the fill not showing. Can't see the white on this fill. Whatever. Okay, let me just cover it with a rectangle. All right, and give it a white. Okay, something is wrong somewhere. Right, let's give it a black. Ah, what happened? Okay, and let's make this a color that we can see on this guy. So let's say I'm building out a card like this, and I want to have 3 sections. I want to have, say, a rectangle, and I want to have a text, and maybe I want to have an icon somewhere in there. All right, let's get this icon, for example, and let's give it a color. Maybe make it bigger depending on how I want to use it. Okay, let's leave it like that. So let's say I want to have the icon just above it, and I want to have the text like this. So now this is, you can say this this is where I'm going to apply my spacing, right? I'm going to see this is the text. This is just the text. I could say this is one section or one group. This is another group because it's just an icon, right? And this is another group because this is it could be maybe an image inside this rectangle. It could just be a simple rectangle shape, whatever. Also, if you're creating curves, you also want to make it aligned to the same numbers on the 8 point grid. You could use 4, you could use 8, use 12, and we could try 16. Or you could just make it round or the same, whatever. So let's keep it at 16. So in this case now, let's say I want to build out, I already have this as, this is 4. I think I would like to use 2. So 4. So go to the main component and adjust it. And now between this guy, this and this, what I have here is 16. And I decide to use 4 instead of 16. So I do it like this. Now between this guy and this section, oh sorry, between these entire guys, let me just group two of them together. Between this guy and this guy, I might want to have a bigger space for it because this is a different thing entirely, and then this section is a different thing entirely. Then maybe I might have other sections. So if I'm saying between an icon and a text, I'm using 4. Every other place in this design, I'm going to have to use 4 for it. And if I'm saying between a group that's a different group entirely and another group, I want to use say 16. Let's see how 16. Or let's use 24. I want to use 24. Oh, 24 looks actually very small. This is a bigger number. Let's use 32. It looks the same. So I want to use 32. Then it means if I'm going to have a different group here, and I want these things to look different. Like I want you to see that this is a group on its own and it's not related to this group. And all these things inside here, they are related to each other, but they're not related to this one. I would have to make the spacing consistent. So the space between this one and this one, if it is 32, that means the space between this one and this one will also be 32. You get? So if I'm trying to relate these two together without this one, I might make the space between this guy and this guy to be lower. I could decide to use, say, 16. In that case, anybody that looks at this, you'll see that, okay, even though this is a group and this is a group and this is a group, you can tell that these two groups are related to each other than this one because of the spacing. See, this one and this one, the spacing between is 16, and then between this one and this one is 32. So that's what spacing does. Spacing helps you group things, and um, it just helps you group things so that people can easily tell what is related to what. So that's it. I don't know if anybody has any question. Any question? Who is talking? I've not heard another person's voice. Where are the others? What happened to them? Let me see. I'm still recording. Wow, 1 hour. Damn, that's crazy. Okay, let me just jump on to the next thing. So we've talked about spacing. Did I mention iconography? Okay, I did. Where I said, okay, I mentioned iconography. Now, the next thing you want to do, maybe I should have started with buttons first. And to me, I think this is the last thing I consider when I'm building out the type style, a style guide rather. So the next thing I consider are buttons. Now, also, if you want to build out buttons, you have to also use your 8 point grid for it. Okay. The fastest way to get buttons started on your design is to just get it from maybe another style guide that exists. So if you see this button, what's the size here? We have a size of 55. You could decide to use this button across your design. But what I do is that I usually use buttons of, I use 48. Here are the buttons I use. I use 48 and I use 56. I use these two for desktop. So I use these two for desktop. While for mobile, my button size for mobile is usually around 40. So around 40. You can also make it smaller. You can decide to use 32. So these numbers are all part of the 8-point grid system. All right. So now let's just rush it out so that we finish. Now, when I'm building out my buttons, I consider three things. I consider buttons according to the color that I'll be using for that design. Number one. So um, it's one color. I consider them by the color that I'll be using. So in this case, since I'm going to have two main colors, which is the primary color and the secondary color. So I'll have buttons that have both the primary and the secondary color, right? So the second thing I consider buttons for is for the style. Yeah, it's for the style. Yeah, I consider buttons for the style. And what the style means is that you could have different kinds of buttons. You could have a button that is just a normal button, just a button with just text inside it. That's the style of that button. You could also, I think we have it here. Let me go down. So you could have, oh yeah, this is it basically. Okay, this is it, right? So you could have a normal button. In this case, they called it a normal button, like this. We could have an outline button like this, and we could have a button with an icon. So in some designs, you might want to have button with an icon. So in that case, you have to design for it. You have to decide it first in your style guide and make sure your developers see it so that they know how to use it. So I usually consider this three. I don't usually consider an icon button just an icon alone, but it could be worth considering. Considering that if you're going to use this style guide, you can just use the same thing. So what I normally do is that then the third thing. Sorry, before I proceed, where's that thing? Then the third thing I do is to consider buttons by the states. So you're going to have some buttons that are, just the normal default. You have buttons for different states, like the hover states when it's pressed, or they call it active when it's being pressed, or active state. Then you want to have another button for its disabled states. So four states. So I think for this one, I'll just put it here: normal, outlined, and with icon. In this one, you want to have the primary, secondary. And then for the state, we want to list out those four states that I've just mentioned. So the first one is default, second one is hover. So you know that when you're building out for mobile, you don't need a hover state because you're using your thumbs, not a cursor. Hover. The third one is pressed. I call it pressed. And then the fourth one is disabled. This is how you build, this is how you consider your buttons, and you build it out accordingly. So I first of all start with just the main the thing. How do you know how to create a button, right? Okay. Nowadays we don't use rectangles to create buttons anymore. We use a frame. We do it like that so that it can be responsive in case you need to add more text to that button. You don't have to manually adjust it. So to build a button nowadays, you just start with the text first. Let's say you want to say start now, right? So once you build out the text, make sure your text aligns with your type style. You get your typography style. make sure that line height and everything, or just use one of the text that you've already created as a style. Then you want to click on auto layout. You select the text and you click on auto layout. Where is it? Get out. If you don't see auto layout, just press Shift A. All right, Shift A. I just did, and now I have a padding around it. So anytime you press Shift A, it just creates a padding around something, and then it wants you to set the distance between that padding in that padding. So in this case, now you see this is a button, and let me show you why it's good to use something like this instead of using a rectangle and a text. So that if I decide to change this to maybe register, and see that the distance is always the same. All right, it's always the same. It's going to be 10, 10, 10, 10. Right? So it makes it easier to use. Yeah, it makes it easier to use. It makes it a very good button to use. Now, another thing you want to work on is the distances. There's a formula for it, right? So usually the formula I use is that the distance between the text or the whatever element is inside and the border of the button, I call it x. And let's say x is 10. Then the distance between the elements inside the button and the left and right side should be 2x. So in this case, this place should be 20. This place should be 20. It's a very good formula that works. So in this case, say here should be 20. It's in the middle, 20. And now you have a consistent formula for any button you want to do. So even if you duplicate this and you want to say here to get started, always going to have that same formula, right? 20 on the side and 10 on the side. It doesn't have to be 10. Sure, you can decide to use whatever. Like, okay, let's stick with our design system. Let's say we want to use 8 in this case, right? And then for this side, we want to use 16. So you still get the same proportions. It's just different now, but it's the same proportion because x and 2x. So you have 8 on both sides, you have 16 on this side. So you could do that. And I've seen people do 3x instead. So they have x on top and they have 3x on the side. In this case, you can decide to use 24 and you still have a good button. All right. So is that clear? Yeah. Okay. I did an outline button so that you, yeah, I did an outline button so that you see it. So let me just take out this thing. So usually when you do an auto layout, you just see it like this. You're not really seeing any outline or any fill. You just click on it and add the fill by itself. Okay, so you just click on the fill and get your fill, and then you can make your fill color to be whatever you've picked for, let's say, yeah, your button color. So in this case, this one, and let's make that text white. So in this case, I have a nice button, and I want to give it, maybe I want it to be a bit more playful, so I want to give it some curves on along the edges. I can decide to stick with my 8 point grid system, and I can use 8. I think it's too playful. Let's go with 4 then. So better, right? So now you've done that, and this is your primary color. So you want to have another one that is your secondary color. So let's just give it a different color. I don't want to have to go check. Let's say this is my secondary color. So it's I have now built out buttons for colors. So I have buttons for colors, right? Now let's have buttons for states. What is states? I think it's for style, sorry. So let's have buttons for style. So we bring this back again for styles. I'm going to, It's now for style, I'm going to have a normal button. Um, let me do something like this. For normal, let's call this one outline, and let's call this one icon plus text. So quickly to do an outline button, you simply just go here, duplicate it. You hide the fill. This is the fill, and this is the stroke. The stroke is the outline. So you hide the fill and you give it a stroke. If there's no stroke, you just click plus to turn on a stroke. And then for the stroke, of course, you can decide to use maybe the primary color for the stroke or the secondary color. Just make it look nice. Okay. So in this case, let's use the primary color, and the text would also have the primary color. Okay, so we have a style. We have for normal one, which is the field button. We have an outline button, and then let's build out a button with an icon. Um, so the new auto layout is pretty cool because it makes things a lot easier. Before, if you wanted to add an icon to an already made button, you'd have to struggle with it a lot. I'm looking for an icon. Okay, it's not here. Let's get an icon from. Where's that icon? Let's get this. Was it this icon? Shoot. Let's just get an icon from somewhere else. Fine. Okay. So now I have an icon and I want to bring it here. If you click on this thing to inspect the auto layout panel, you see this part here that says, already we have this horizontal padding, which is this part and this part. We have the vertical padding, which is this part and this part. So what is this one for? Now this one is between elements inside that layout. So this is a layout already. So between elements inside that layout. So if I should duplicate this R, this text, we now have two elements inside this layout. And this is what denotes the distance between those two elements. Okay. So let me just go back. So if I drag this button inside here, now the distance between this icon and this text is what that this thing is talking about. So let me increase it. And I want it to have a distance of say 4. Now you have an icon with text. If you think it's too big for the text, let's reduce this. I don't like it as okay. If you think it's too big, you can reduce it here. Um, let's make it 16 and see how it looks. Okay, it looks better, doesn't it? Looks better now. So the distance between distance between the two of them is 4 because I set it up in this auto layout panel. Now we have that. We should also create for so we have for our style. The next thing we need to do is to create for our states. And remember, for states, we should have at least 4 states. So we have an icon for the default states. For states, we have for what's the next one? Over. We have for pressed, and we have for disabled. I know your default one is always going to be this one. It can be a primary color. Did someone else join? Okay, all right. It can be a primary color. It can be a secondary color. It doesn't matter, right? It can be a primary color, a secondary color. It doesn't matter. But all you are doing is to just create this state so that it's easier for you to do next time. So for your hover, there are usually two ways of building out a hover button. You can make the hover button to become darker when a mouse hovers on it, or you can make it brighter. But I think the more realistic way is to make it darker. So you pick that color and just make it darker a bit, right? You don't have to. touch the text, just do only the color behind it. In that case, you could tell that so this is just a normal button, and then when the mouse hovers over it, it casts some kind of dark shadow and it becomes darker. It focuses on the text. It wants you to click register, right? Now for pressed one, let me see what they did here. Okay, for the pressed one, they made it whiter. Okay, you could decide to say the point here is that you just wanted to give some kind of feedback to the user to tell them that something has happened. It won't make sense if somebody presses a button and then they don't know if it worked or not because it doesn't give any kind of feedback. It doesn't respond. So it's that response that the button gives back to the user that lets them know that okay, they actually did something. Otherwise, they might just keep pressing it one more time and they'll be wondering why it's not working. Yet so you could make it that when they press it, it turns like this. Or you could even give it the secondary color, right? Where is the secondary color we picked for this one? You could give it this one. You can also give your hover the secondary color, or you can make this dark hover become your press state. It's just the feedback that really matters. All right. So now we have our default states, we have our hover states, we have our press states as the secondary color. So basically, when you press this button, it turns like this. You could make it white out like what these guys did. Now for the disabled, you're going to use your gray color. Remember when we talked about colors, when we picked out colors, you just pick out one of these gray colors and use it to cover the this thing. In this case, we have 898989. So let's say this button is disabled. Okay, let's give it back the normal color. Now I want it to be disabled, so I'm going to okay, that's not going to work. I'm just going to change everything. I'm going to change the color to that gray color that we have here. So we have 898989. Looks like this. What I usually do is that I also change the text. So the text won't still look all white and be looking at you. So you can pick a shade of the gray that you made. So in this case, let's try 8989. Let's try 8989. So you just pick one of the gray colors that you have there. So you could pick something like this. And now you have your disabled color, your button. Now, I know you might probably be asking, for secondary colors, how do you design hover buttons for secondary colors? Sorry, for secondary buttons. How do you design hover states for secondary buttons? So, this is for, let's say this is for normal. Let me just say, let's say we use all of this for primary color, and oh no, let's call it normal. Sorry, normal, and we have outlined. So for outlined, we already have this as our default color, our default states. So for the hover states uh, for outline buttons, they don't change a lot of things. You can just one thing you should not add is don't add a what's it called? Don't add a shadow. Adding a shadow to an outline button is bad. So you can add a shadow here to make it outline. I didn't even talk about that. So you can add a shadow here like that and maybe increase the blur a bit. Whatever. This is all part of you could maybe make it dark or you could add a shadow. That's part of making things responsive so that the user gets some kind of feedback. Now for prior for secondary for outline buttons rather, what you can do is you can change the color alone. You don't need to add um a shadow. So in this case, I'll just change the color of the button. Change the color of the button to that darker state. Or I could just change it to the secondary button, like I talked about the other time. So in that case, make it in such a way that we have a normal button, and then when they hover on it, because it's an outline button, you can't have a shadow. And so maybe sometimes making it darker doesn't even really work because the user might not see that kind of slight change, right? Because it's just really thin. So you want to change the color. So I think I should take this out. This one works better. So if you're building an outlined button and you're trying to decide what the overstate for that outlined button would be like, just change the color to the secondary color, whatever. Now for the press states, you can decide to change the color further. You can decide to add some kind of shade to it. In this case, let's say when it's pressed, it now looks like this. Or when it's pressed, it looks a bit whiter. Okay, that's the color here. That's I get it right. Oh no, I did not. So now this is the pressed one. And then how about a disabled one? Just use the same gray that you've used for this one. In this case, what's the gray here? It's 898989. So come here, here's 898989. Yeah, it's um, so there you go. Now you've built out a kind of table for your states. You built one out for the normal buttons, and you built one out for the outline buttons. And even while you're considering the outline buttons, you're also considering the states at the top, right? So you can now build one out for your icon and text buttons. So in this case, you have this for the normal one. So we have the normal one, and then we have hover states. Just basically for this icon and text, just do the same thing you did on the normal one, right? Because it has a fill, so all of those things will still be visible. Okay. So for the press states, you can either give it the secondary color, or you can decide to make it and give it the secondary color. Right, it's Figma, right? Then for the disabled states, just do the same thing that you have here. Okay. So I have 898989. There you go. Text 505050. So this one. Well, all right. So there you have it. That's how you build out your buttons. Now, anywhere you're using it, you can now make all of these primary. You can make all of these components. So in this case, you turn this one into a component. You turn this one into a component. Turn all of these into components. And then let's say, let me just show you something, how to use them easily so you can use them interchangeably in a design. Oops. Just select everything and make all of them components. So in this case, you go here, you click create multiple content. So I have everything as components. Now I'm going to make everything variants of each other, right? So I'll just come here and say combine as variants, and you see something covered it. So what you want to do at this point, once you've made everything, you make each of them individual components, and then you combine all of them as variants. So it means this is a variant of this one, this is a variant of this one. You can now come here and basically rename it. So for this one, you can say default normal, right? And for this one, you could say default hover. This one, you could say default pressed, and so on and so on. Default disabled. The outline text, you say outlined um outlined default, and this one is now, where is it, this is now outline hover. Okay, so let me just show you an example of where you can use this. So let's say I am working, I have a frame, and I'm trying to use any of these buttons, for example. I'm using this button somewhere. All right. And I decided, oh, do you know what? I think I don't want to use this button. I want to change it to, I want to use a secondary button here. I want to use a secondary button under here. Then you can easily come here and, uh, okay, no. Oh, I see. So I think one thing I didn't do is that I didn't add the slashes. So you should always add your slashes because they are Figma's way of, telling that things are different. So in this case, that's still there. Okay. Glory jump off. Let me see. Hey, Glory, say hi. Should be able to say hi. All right. So what I was trying to achieve is, where if you have a particular button, you can click here and basically find an instance to that button. But I can't seem to find it here. So not sure why that is. Let me get to a different place and see what happens. We have a primary color, we have default state. Okay, one thing I'm going to do is maybe I'll do a follow-up video for this one where I basically explain how to arrange these buttons. But what I was trying to achieve is that you don't necessarily have to go look for your buttons. Let's say you're here and you want to use, say, a different type of button. You don't necessarily have to, especially if you have a very large design canvas where you have lots of things littered everywhere. You can simply just change it right where you are by using this display. So this thing is supposed to come out here and show default, show other states that I've created like defaults, outline, hover, and the rest of them. And I can just click, and because all of them are part of this variants, they are variants of each other. You can just click them and you have that button changed to maybe this outline button, for example. You'll have it changed to this button with an icon and text. So that was what I was trying to achieve, but I'm going to check to see how where the error is from, and then I'll resolve it. All right. So with that, I think, yeah. So after buttons, I think the next thing you want to consider are like other parts of the design, because you want to be able to work fast. So you can consider things like input field, but I don't usually add them as part of my design system, as part of my style guide. I just get them from a design system and use. So you consider your input field, you consider how you design cards, you consider how you want to design modals, you consider how your drop downs would be. So input field and drop downs are basically the same thing. You also consider your tab styling. Um, in which case, let's say you have categories for something. Um, for example, let me just say, let's say you're building an e-commerce platform, and you have, just use that for example, give it a feel. So this is a kind of, um, we call it tabs, right? You would call it tabs or you call it categories, where you have clothes, you have maybe another one you call it shoes, and then maybe you call the third one bags, right? So what kind of style are you using? What kind of style will you be using as your what kind of style will you be using for your tabs? Will you use this method, or will you use this other method? Let me show you this other method where you have clothes, and let's say there's a text under two. You have clothes, and then let's say these are shoes, and oops, say this is bags. Oops. All right. So IDs. So are you using this type of are you using this type of tabs or are you using this type of tabs? So that's up for you to decide. So you decide on things like let me just write them down. Impute fields, uh dimension again, drop downs, tab styles, boxes. I think checkbox is also part of icons, but some icons don't come with it. And then let's just say checkboxes and toggles and cards. So So these are the other things that you consider when you are building out your style guide. You want to, and how I do this is that I simply don't bother about these other ones because you can just get them by looking at other people's design and seeing how they use them. Which one do you think is nicer, right? So hold on, let me make this look better. So usually the active one should be brighter, and then any other one should not be that bright. Okay, so it should look like that in this case. So for the input field, I usually just get a design system, and there's this one I have that I use. Let me just show you guys ant design system. I don't know files. So we have this one. I think this is the real one. This is the real ant design system. It's open source. You can use it. So you go here, you go duplicate, and ant design system basically contains is like in a design system is like a bigger version of a style guide. So style guides are just supposed to help you get started. And the most important things to think about are the colors, the typography, the grid system, spacing, icons, and buttons. Any other thing that you have to think about, you can just look for a design system that you like to use, and then you get those ones from there and use them. Or you can just create yours. So in this case, I'll just open my Ant design system. I'm going to make this one available as well for you guys. So you scroll down, and what I'm looking for is input fields. So you have checkers, you have okay inputs. So you click on inputs, and you want to see how exactly how these inputs are used, how they are designed, the sizes, because everything is not arbitrary. You get. So let's look at this one. Look at the size here. They use 32. 32 is also part of the 8-point grid system. So you can decide, okay, fine. I think I'm going to use all my input fields as 32. So you can just copy this, Control C, and bring it to your design piece. So now you have an input field that you can always work with. Of course, I think you can turn off something like maybe this icon. You can decide to turn it off, and you just have a simple input field. And let's see the spacing for the input field. They use 12 between the beginning of the input field and the text. They use 12 for it, and then 5 above. So you could decide to do an input field just like how we did buttons. So in this case, let's say this is our input field. I can decide to attach it. All right. I can decide to adjust this to say, okay, this is x, this is 2x, which should be 16. Let's leave it at 3x, 24. But then since I'm using this as an input field, let's make this one 12, for example. Then let's just, oops. And let's just increase this all the way, right? So you could change your buttons to become input fields, right? So either you get it from a design system or you create an input field yourself. But I like getting input fields from a design system because it makes it easier for you to get other types. For example, if you want to show, you have just basic types of input fields like let's say you want to show how it's going to look like when somebody starts typing. You want to show how it's going to look like when maybe they selected it with by just using their keyboard. You want to show how it's going to look like when it's disabled, right? So that's why I like just getting my input field from a design system. Okay, see where they are. They're all here. So it shows you how it looks like on the normal, how it looks like when you're typing, how it's disabled. It shows you when it has maybe an icon and all of that. So always work with this design systems, guys. It's really, really helps. Can't stress that enough. Any question about this? I think I'm going to stop this video here. So yes, like I said, any other thing, drop downs and whatever, they are all part of things that you can simply just get from a design system and use. And of course, if you think maybe, for example, it doesn't really correspond with maybe the spacings that you have in your design, you can simply copy it first, like this one, and then you can detach that instance. Detaching an instance means you're detaching it from the master components over at that design system to detach it. You can now adjust it anyhow you want. So you see the whole thing here. You can adjust it anyhow you want. You can decide to use the same thing, but maybe you just want it to be a bit longer, right? Maybe you want it to just come down a bit, like bigger. You can adjust it anyhow you want, and then you can make it a master component in your own design, and then you can use it anywhere else. So that's how you do. That's how you work with things like input field, toggles, and the rest. Now, when it comes to building out cards, let's say you want to build out a simple modal card that's let's say you want to build out a simple modal card that just has a cancel button right here and then other text and everything. Now, how do you think of, how do you find the good layouts for that? So one of the things I do is that I just go online and look for modals, right? I just go online and I do stuff like card UI design because I'm looking for inspiration, okay? So you come here, you go to images, and you see how it's used in different projects. See how this guy did his own. It has the header text and text, and see how this one is. So anyone you think you like, you just screenshot it and take it to your design. And you want to make sure that for actions that look similar, the modals should always look similar. So if you build your modal and then it has this type of this layout where you have the header text, for example, no, oops. You have the header text, you have maybe some kind of subtext, and the button is always at the bottom left. Every other model you're building for that design, for that product, your button would always be um, at the bottom left. So that's why modals are important to think about as well. So you want to think about how you create those modals and reuse them over and over again. So usually once you've built out the first model, you make sure everything is well. Let's say let's just do something with this. Let's say I decide to add my text. Where's that place where I had that text? Okay, let's use this one. To save time, I'll just shrink it myself. Okay, I'll shrink this one myself. Attach the okay. Okay, let's say we have something like this, and I want to make sure that all of my modals look like this. By the time I'm done, so let's hide that one. For example, bold. I'm supposed to have some kind of X icon here that displays that, that allows you cancel or whatever. So by the time I'm done with this kind of this, I can save it as a style. So I just save it as a component and leave it there, and I could call it modal. Now the good thing about this is that if I'm going to try and build out another modal for maybe another flow, this modal is where well, let's just call it register. This modal is where you register for maybe this platform or whatever. I want to build out another modal where maybe it's supposed I'm supposed to check out something. Let's say checkout page or whatever. Now I can't really change anything here, right? So all I have to do is to just make sure that every time I'm using this type of modal, everything aligns with what I have here. So if the text is going to be different, it's always going to have a header text, or it's always going to have a header text and a subtext, and whatever is here, whatever. And then this button can also change to say I think it's the same. Right. So basically, it allows you set up, reuse components over and over and over again, and that's basically what modals do. If you go to a design system, you can find cards, and you can see how they are being used, and you can decide to use it. So see this one, we call it the title, there's more button, whatever, whatever. So you can use it like that. Or if it has an image, then this is how they want you to use it. So you can put the image like this, and then maybe a header text and a body text underneath it. It's going to have maybe other icons underneath. So just play around with all of this stuff and find the one that works best for you. That's it with cards. Yeah, so I guess there's nothing else. If you want to talk about checkboxes, you could also find checkboxes in this design system as well. You can also, they even have tooltips, so they tell you how you can design tooltips for your UI design. So all of these things, you don't have to design them yourself. Just pick them and disable detach the component and reuse them how you want. Okay. All right. Now, I know I was going to talk about alignment, but time has really gone. How about we do it next time? Yeah, the video is already 2 hours, so I'll just save it now and I'll upload it to YouTube so that you can go back and rewatch it. And I'm also going to drop other video tutorials that will be able to help you. Some of the things that I've described here, they would probably explain it faster. Some of those videos are like 6 minutes. Okay. All right, Gloria, how far now? She's just quiet. She's not saying anything. That's crazy. All right. Bye, Dami. Bye, Glory. All right. Bye.